Hi, I'm Bette Banjack, and this is Look Who's Cooking. And today my very special guest is Shelli Menkowitz. And Shelli was here once before when her husband was one of the guests, and she was a sous chef that ran around behind, and we could never catch her on camera. But this time we're very, very pleased to have you as your own special guest.
Thank you, Bette.
And we're going to look at Passover and some of the customs and some of the things you would like to share with everyone. So we'll just get started with whatever you want to start with.
Okay, Passover is always comes, of course, in the springtime of the year, and it's a holiday that's filled with cooking, filled with all kinds of symbolic foods and recipes that are specific to that time of the year. And I thought we'd start with one that is a favorite of my children. It's made of vegetables, actually vegetables and fruit. It's going to be made from a sweet potato and an apple and a carrot and some other ingredients that one of which is special for the holiday. And we'll start.
First of all, how many children do you have?
I have 3 children.
But I heard some alarming news.
What's
you
that?
don't have little children like I expected.
No,
you have very big children.
No. I have a 27-year-old, I have a 25-year-old, and my baby, who's 21, is a junior in college, and he's spending the semester in Australia.
Hey,
So
maybe we'll bring
he's,
some recipes back.
Bungee jumping and
no.
rappelling through waterfalls. He doesn't have time for that.
Okay. Well, let's get started with the muffins.
Okay, of course, with all Passover dishes, the basis of the holiday comes, the story of the Passover holiday starts in the book of Exodus in the Bible. And we're told that for that week out of the year, to commemorate the exodus from Egypt, the exodus from slavery in Egypt of the Jews, that for that week of the year, to remember the holiday, we would not eat any food that has leavening. Unleavened bread is what matzah is a good translation for the word matzah. And when we left Egypt, and I say we because all Jews think of themselves as if, in every generation, as if they themselves had come out of Egypt in the time of the Bible. And when we left Egypt, there was not enough time for the bread to rise. And so they brought with them unleavened cakes that had just cooked for a very short period of time as they went out into the wilderness. And it's the reason that we use matzah is in commemoration of that event.
Yeah.
So
we'll see some later.
We'll see some later, sure. But this recipe begins with a lot of grating. And if you hand me the grater over there, this is how we did it in the old days. But today, with the magic of food processors, of electric food processors, it makes this recipe very, very easy. We start with a cup of grated sweet potato, raw, totally raw. And
sweet potatoes are my favorite.
Are they? Some people eat them raw, but this
Yams
is
too. Yams or sweet potatoes.
This is carrot, also grated raw, and then apple. We just mix it all together. If you'd like to start doing that.
Sure, I'll mix.
Just mix those 3 together. And then what we're going to do, I'll measure out some cake meal. This is, cake meal is a flour product. There are certain things that are not eaten during the week of Passover. They are grains, 5 specific grains, things like wheat and barley and rye and oats and a grain called spelt. They're the first 5 things that were prohibited for the holiday. And
What's spelt?
Spelt is just another grain that that you see in the health food stores, but we don't see very much anymore. And then in later years, foods that were similar to that were added to the list. Things that, legumes, anything that when water is added to them, they puff up. So it's really symbolic of this
The raising.
unleavened, right? So things like rice and corn and beans and peas, even buckwheat. And peanuts are a legume. So we use peanut oil, but we don't eat peanuts. And their traditions vary according to what part of the world you live in. If you live in the Middle East, where rice is a staple in your diet, you're going to have to eat it during this week. So people who live there do eat rice during Passover. We're going to add to this, this is called cake meal, matzah cake meal, and it's a special flour substitute that we use for this holiday. And we'll measure out a cup of that and add it to this mix.
You need this.
Okay. And then we're going to add to that some oil.
Oh, here's the
We
oil.
need some oil.
And here's
We're going
the
to put,
sugar.
we're going to add 3/4 of a cup of sugar. It's sweet. And it does have some oil in it, but there are no eggs in it, which is very interesting.
It must be difficult with so much limitation of what you can't use to come up with so many wonderful
Well,
recipes.
people throughout the centuries have been very, very creative about what they could make. And they've come up with, they realized that to make a sponge cake, you put in a dozen eggs, and you can make anything rise. So things can puff up.
Eggs
Everything
weren't-
doesn't have to be flat.
Eggs are not one of the taboos.
No, absolutely. There are a lot of eggs. Cholesterol is a real problem with this holiday because you do eat so many eggs. I'm going to add some oil for some moisture. I've actually cut back on the amount of oil that was originally called for in this recipe, and it doesn't hurt it one bit. And then I'm going to put in a teaspoon of cinnamon, a teaspoon of nutmeg, a teaspoon of salt, and a teaspoon of baking soda. Baking powder is a leavening agent, but baking soda isn't. And we use baking soda in this recipe. And then we're going to stir that all together.
Well, baking soda is a chemical that interacts with baking powder. So if you don't have baking powder in there, it's
It's
not
not
going to
gonna-
interact with the baking leavening.
Now, sometimes I dig right
wanna-
in. You can do it in a bowl. I love to hold
Oh,
up a
yeah.
bowl so you can really get some leverage
Oh,
when you stir
Bubba
it.
way or
Exactly.
grandmother way or...
Exactly. And then, if you
Is
want,
that
you can
all?
actually get right in. That's all that goes into this. You can get right in with your fingers. And as you work it this way, your counter's a little high for me. I'm on my tiptoes. As we, that's much better idea. Thank you very much. As this works the oil into it better than even a spoon does. It's almost like kneading it, but just
Yeah.
to incorporate all the ingredients.
It's not that the counter's high, it's your shit. We need
And
this.
then, we're going to lightly
Would you like to
grease.
wipe your hands?
Thank you. We're going to lightly grease the muffin tin. I don't know if you did that
I
already
did that.
for me. Thank you.
I hope I
And
did that. Yes, I did.
You did
What do
indeed. And we're going to use the spoon.
need? Can I get you another?
We're going to, no, this is fine. We're going to fill this muffin tin. You see, it's a rather dry mixture,
Mhm.
but it bakes up very, very nicely. If you put in more oil, sometimes it can be
Gets
too
heavier?
greasier,
Greasier.
and I'd rather have it a little bit lighter. Let's use the word dense. It's a dense batter. Dense is a nice euphemism for heavy, but it's not heavy in taste. There's the sweetness of course, the sugar, but the cinnamon and the nutmeg are very flavorful.
Well, not
And
at this
the-
time of the year, but you could almost fry this like a latke.
I bet you could. We'll have
We'll
to
have to
try
try that and see if you come up with a new recipe.
So we do that. We just
Make it.
makes it. And what I usually do, if I find that one is a little larger than another, I can
Yeah, but you need
steal
more in here.
on more in here, and then I can look around, and if I'll just pat it down, because they're going to bake exactly as you put them in. They're not going to rise very much, remember. And I'll rob from Peter to pay Paul over here. I'll just take a little from here and a little from there so they're equal. And we're going to cover them with foil. If you'll hand me that foil sheet.
We have to use this piece because the roll of foil disappears.
That's fine. We're going to put this in an oven that we've preheated to 325 degrees, and we're going to bake it for half an hour. And because after a half an hour, we're going to take the foil off and bake it for an additional 15 minutes and let it brown a little more. I serve it hot as a side dish. As a vegetable on the plate that you would eat with a fork, but my children always loved it because they look like muffins, and they could pick them up with their fingers and nobody would yell at them.
Even when they were little?
When they were little.
Does it mean there's mini muffin pans?
Sure,
if they had
terrific for that. I have made.
Patience, that would be wonderful.
Last year I actually made those using this recipe and served it as a dessert because they're so sweet. And you can serve them at room temperature.
The secret of those little pans, the secret is to have 14 of them like I do. Because who wants to, fill one or two and then put it in the oven and have to wait? You have to do this in a round robin, and it's true. Either by buying them or someone giving them or whatever. I have 14 of those little mini pans, and it's wonderful. And that's the way to do it.
Great for those little cheesecakes, those chocolate, what are
those
they called? Black bottoms, the
and
chocolate cheesecakes. That's a marvelous one. I'm going to pop this in the oven.
Okay. Now you're going to share your recipes with us, and you're giving them to me. And if you want them, you can, write in. You all know what to do. Look at the end and see the address. The next thing, are we making the chopped liver?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The next thing I'm really interested in is Shelly's going to make a mock chopped liver. Now, I personally don't like liver. You've heard me say that probably in every show that you've seen me in. And the thing is, there's no liver in this. I like the taste of the onions and different things in chopped liver, but I never like liver. The taste of liver. I'll get it out. It's even getting me nervous now. And this smells so wonderful with the plate she has done.
The basis for this recipe, it's really a vegetarian chopped liver, people call it. It's a mock chopped liver. There are people who can't tell the difference, although truthfully I don't know how people can tell the difference, but what they're tasting is wonderful, wonderful caramelized onions in there.
Oh, is that what it is?
The trick is to cook those onions for a very, very long time. So we will...
That's a trick for pot roast, too.
Anything tastes good. Another wonderful little recipe, if you ever have matzo balls left over on the holiday and you don't feel like you've used up your soup and you still have extra matzo balls and don't want to make another pot of soup, you can caramelize a whole pan full of onions and just stir the matzo balls into that and serve it as a side dish. You don't have to slice anything. Just stir the matzo balls into the sliced onions, into the caramelized onions, and it's a wonderful, wonderful recipe. It actually comes from a famous restaurant in New York called Ratner's, a kosher restaurant in New York City. And this mock chopped liver is also a Ratner's recipe. It's really an egg salad.
I learned today, in talking with you, that you keep a kosher kitchen.
That's right.
All the time. I don't mean just,
Not just
a week out of here and a week
Some
there.
people change their kitchens over and do special things for the Passover holiday, for Pesach. But
you don't have to do that.
No, I do.
Oh,
absolutely, absolutely. Passover is the time of year for the best spring cleaning you can ever imagine. Because for the holiday, we remove from our kitchens every trace of anything with leavening. So my jar of yeast goes, all the bread goes, and every crumb that might be in a drawer or on a shelf or caught in the burners of the stove or in the crevices in the refrigerator, everything gets a maximum cleaning. It's a wonderful, wonderful excuse for spring cleaning. I think that may be how it all started in the spring.
Would you like to come to my house sometime and
Sure.
do the changeover?
Can I do it the week after when I'm rested up?
Okay. Yeah, I know it's a very tiring.
It is a tiring holiday, but as I said, with energy savers like a food processor, so you don't have to grate everything by hand.
Well, it's a
really
sad
helps.
holiday too, so that sort of brings down a little. It's not Hanukkah.
It's not Hanukkah, but it's a very interesting mix of sadness and joy.
Yeah.
there are all kinds of symbols of the holiday that appear on the Seder plate. The Seder is the meal that we have on the first two nights of the holiday. And as I said before, the holiday lasts a whole week. And the first two nights of the holiday, before we sit down to a festive holiday meal, we start with essentially a service. And we have a special book called the Haggadah. Haggadah means the telling. And there are many versions, many beautiful versions with great illustrations that have been made through the years. There are lots and lots of different Haggadot, but the book itself, the text itself, the basic text remains the same. And then people have written special ones. In the 60s, we had the Freedom Haggadah, where we looked at all the connections between the civil rights movement and the exodus from Egypt, the whole "let my people go" kind of thing with spirituals. At different times, there are Haggadahs that speak to a certain need that people, things that people want to talk about at that time. But the basic Seder. Seder is a word that means order, and the basic order of the Seder is always the same.
Okay, hurry up.
Okay, we got to start this. Could you hand me the hard-boiled eggs?
Hand you the what?
The hard-boiled eggs are in the cooler down
there.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm sorry. No, we need to actually start by sautéing some onions, and we're going to do that in a half a cup of oil. And you're going to tell me if this is turned on, Betty.
Oh.
I hope.
Is it on?
I just turned it to on, but I don't know if you have to do something special.
Yes, it's a trick. It's a trick.
Okay.
Are you going to need these?
I'm going to need all of those things, yes.
Okay.
This is basically an egg salad, but the trick is to flavor it as you would real chopped liver. So the flavor, you're not tasting the flavor of liver, but what you're tasting is the wonderful seasonings. So we start with some onions and some celery that could just be chopped in a wonderful old chopping bowl just like this. But instead what I did was use here you go. Instead what I did was use the food processor. So I chopped it, it's minced, it's chopped up very, very fine. And I'm going to cook it here. I'm going to start it going, but this is actually going to have to cook for a very, very long time. The trick to caramelizing onions, to cooking onions until they're absolutely brown, is to do it slowly and long. If the temperature is too high, it's going to burn. You don't want black onions, you want brown onions. And we're just going to let that cook, and the room will fill with a wonderful aroma that unfortunately won't transfer through the television.
Oh yeah, well it won't transfer through the television, but it'll go through the building and everyone will be up here.
Right. What I've done, this recipe calls for a cup of minced celery along with 2 large onions. They're all minced up and they're frying away in a half a cup of oil. It also calls for a dozen hard-boiled eggs, or you can use 18 eggs and use 12 of them, all 18 egg whites and only 9 egg yolks. Mm-hmm. In other words, for every one whole egg, you can substitute 2 egg whites. So when you have
to be a mathematician.
You do a little bit of math here, and you can chop it up like this, the old-fashioned way. This is called, in Yiddish, the word for a chopper is a hocker. And this is a hocking bowl, a chopping bowl, and a hocker. It was a gift from my mother-in-law when I was first married. And what we're going to do is simply chop up the eggs, or do it the easy way in the food processor.
This bowl is really pretty nice for how old it must be if you have a 27-year-old son.
I'm also going to add to this 8 ounces of walnuts that have also been chopped. Oh. Now, this is a great job to give to the kids. You let them crack the walnuts and then put them in a bag and beat on them with a hammer or a great big spoon. They love to do that. And when they're finely chopped, I chopped mine in the food processor, of course. Makes my life so very easy. And then there's another little addition that made this taste particularly good, and that was that I added some roasted garlic. I just put some cloves of garlic in the oven with a little bit of oil, and that nice paste, that garlic paste that comes out of them, really is a wonderful addition. So I'm going to add now some of this is the celery and the onions already chopped. Yes, I think we can add that to this. Okay, that's just fine. And had a little bit of it made up ahead of time, but in the meantime, we have to keep looking at these. And then when this is totally finished and brown, you see it's still green, it's going to cook for at least another half an hour. Okay. When it's totally combined.
That'll finish when the show's over.
Sure.
We'll finish it up so there's some...
And we'll add it all to it. I have some over on the side that I made earlier that you can enjoy. But the combination of flavors, the celery and the caramelized onions and the roasted garlic and the walnuts, that nutty taste.
Yeah.
When you eat it, you don't taste walnut. You just know that something good is in there.
I can smell that from here.
Yes,
you know.
It is good.
So then when the onions are done, you mix it in there?
And you can serve it with crackers as an hors d'oeuvre. You can serve it on a lettuce leaf as an appetizer. And it's a healthy alternative.
Why don't you get the one that's finished? This one's going to have to cook a while.
Certainly.
We all know that.
Certainly. Okay, and we can take a spoon or a knife, Betty, and just spread it on those crackers. It's delicious.
Oh, yeah, can I taste?
Sure. I'm going to take a look at our muffins, though.
You look at the muffins, and I'll get the knife.
Okay, we're going to uncover the muffins, because after a half an hour, the muffins are uncovered in the oven, and they finish up for another 15 minutes on their own.
I don't want to mess up the effect, so I'll go from the bottom. I'm not
Go right ahead.
I'm not doing this well.
The first time I ever served egg salad at a party, my mother-in-law loaned me her chicken mold so that the egg salad was in the shape of a chicken sitting there as if roosting on her eggs. No one would touch it because it looked too pretty until somebody came along and with the knife lopped off the chicken's head and proceeded, and then they could enjoy the egg salad.
Very good. I have a friend who makes cakes. I mean, really, cakes. Decorative reproduces buildings and everything else on a cake for. And he and I talk about how angry we get that no one wants to cut the cake. Now, what are you going to do with this cake?
The first slice.
It's sitting there. Somebody better eat it, and no one wants to cut the first slice on the cake. So
no,
that's what happens.
You have to jump right in.
And that's frying along.
And let's take a look. I think.
Is your muffins? We have all different stages of things, so.
Lo and behold.
Oh yeah, look.
We have here. Let's take a plate.
Let's move other stuff.
And do you have another knife? Do you
For
have
the finished
we
good.
Can lift it up
I'll
with?
get you another one.
Okay. And we'll pop these out. You can see them. They turn a dark brown after they've baked. See what they look like, and they don't rise very much. And just with a spoon or a knife, you lift them out.
They look like little meat cakes.
They're dark, so they look like meat. But as I said before, if you make them in the mini muffin tins, they're a delightful little dessert.
They smell wonderful.
So there's good spices in there.
Yeah, spices are wonderful. Spices are probably one of the most expensive things there is around. People don't realize that.
That's right.
Saffron, what is it, $2,000 a pound or something?
But turmeric is a nice substitute for saffron. The trick, I'm not sure how many people actually appreciate the flavor of saffron, but the yellow color is what they're looking for. So turmeric is a nice substitute.
Cumin too, which is another warm flavor.
Cumin, yes,
thing,
absolutely.
So here's this. You're still frying.
We're still frying away.
Move this over to the table?
Okay.
Everything, and then we can take a look at it again, and maybe you can explain some of the symbolic things.
Surely.
I'll bring the knife. Okay, here we go.
Okay, as I said, there is a Haggadah, a book that goes along to tell the story and to set out the order, the Seder of the program. And the program on a Seder night is really an education for children.
Is that when they ask, why is tonight different than any other night?
Exactly. That's the beginning, the introduction to the 4 questions. And traditionally, the youngest child at a Seder asks the 4 questions, and they apply, they pertain to the different customs of the holiday. And the child asks, why is this night different from all over nights? You keep stirring that. That's great. Why is this night different? On all other nights, we can eat leavened bread or unleavened bread. Why on this night do we only eat unleavened bread? And why all through the year we can eat any kind of herbs, but on this night we eat bitter herbs. The bitter herbs, we use horseradish.
The dish.
We have this this plate right here.
Yeah. We'll wait till there it is. It's on.
Okay, we bitter herbs,
You want to explain all?
I will, but let me just tell you the other questions real quick, and then we'll go to what they pertain to.
Okay.
On all other nights, we don't even dip once. On this night, we dip twice. And what's this dipping all about? And the other question is, on all other nights, we eat sitting or reclining, but on this night, we recline. And the rest of the evening is spent explaining to the children and all the assembled family guests why we do things differently on this night, and in doing so, tells the story of the holiday. The Seder plate has all the symbols of the holiday. There is horseradish, which this is what a horseradish root looks like when you actually buy it in the store. This is prepared horseradish. You're familiar with that. And this, if you wanted to just peel and cut up a piece of horseradish, you can see if you want to see if it really tastes bitter. Bitter herbs are used to explain to people the feeling, the bitterness of slavery.
Not my favorite.
The first time I ever made it, I went to the store, and instead of buying a regular horseradish, I saw the Korean daikon radish. And when the kids tasted it, they said, this isn't bitter. What are they talking about bitter? This tastes really sweet, because daikon is a sweet radish. The hard-boiled egg, it's actually a roasted egg, and that represents it's something that was brought as a sacrifice to the temple. The roasted shank bone also commemorates the original sacrifices that were brought to the temple at the time of the holiday. We don't do sacrifices anymore, but we have all these references to historically to how things were.
Now,
the parsley.
I'm sorry.
The parsley is a spring, a symbol of spring. And this, of course, is a springtime holiday. And we dip it in salt water to taste the tears. All right? And then we have one other thing on the Seder plate. This brown mixture right here is called charoset. And charoset is made to look like the mortar that was used in the bricks that the Egyptians forced the people to make for them, presumably to build the pyramids.
I had that one of my shows previous.
It's in one of your cookbooks, actually.
Yeah, it is. I happen to like it. It's just a nice condiment.
It's a very nice condiment. It's made differently in different parts of the world. The most familiar one is made with apples, chopped apples, of course in the food processor, apples and walnuts and cinnamon and sweet wine to flavor it and bind it all together.
And what food processor company do you work for? No, I understand what you mean.
I've used them all, and it makes your life so much easier.
You want to quickly explain some of this?
Wine for
drinking.
You drink 4 cups during the evening, but there's a story that goes with each cup, and it's all very controlled drinking. Yeah. This is a little pitcher and a bowl for use during the Seder. At the beginning, before we start to eat, we actually have to wash our hands. Okay, and that's part of the Seder service, to wash your hands.
This is the holiday where you set an empty seat?
That's right. That's right. There's always an extra wine glass, an extra kiddush cup, as we call it, on the table, filled with wine for the prophet Elijah. In the Bible, the prophet Elijah never dies. He sort of disappears. And the idea is that someday, before the Messiah comes, Elijah the prophet will return. So every night at a Seder, during the program of the Seder, somebody goes to the front door and opens the door just in case Elijah comes in, and nobody, he does it so fast, nobody actually sees him. It's like Santa Claus. It's, whipping in and out. But there's always a cup of wine left for Elijah.
And what is this lovely thing?
And there are always 3 matzahs on the Seder table. And they're usually covered. This is actually a special cover that has sort of an envelope with 3 little places for the matzah to be. And the matzah is actually used at different points as we eat the symbolic meal with the charosas and with the horseradish. There's all the symbolism that comes before the real meal.
Well, listen, I think we've all learned a lot, or refreshed our memory. If we didn't know, if we knew before, we now know again. And thank you very much for coming.
My pleasure.
You got to be here all by yourself today, and I'm really thrilled with that. And we're going to go on and finish this batch of mock chopped liver. So this is Bette Banjack and Shelli Menkowitz for Look Who's Cooking. See ya.